Inspired Evolution, and it is such a treat to be here today. Go on, laugh it up.
I love this guy.
This is going to be so much fun. There's going to be lots of giggles and lots of laughs here. We have with us today Amy O'Meara. Amy, how are you?
I'm amazing. I'm so amazing.
This is the thing. When are you not, though? When you're sleeping, I guess. You're probably just...
No, I think I'm amazing when I sleep. I like, there's a smile on my face when I'm sleeping.
I love that. I want to come almost like be creepy about it now and come watch like, is she really... Anyway, sorry, excuse us. We're friends, so this might be a deep and intimate episode. For those tuning in to Amy O'Meara for the first time, she's an internationally recognized educator, she's a speaker, an author, and she's the founder of Life Meant International. Can't wait to dive deep into what Life Meant is really means and meant. It works to empower women and children to live lives that basically encompass growth, fulfillment, and self-development, right? Which we really bond over that. She's an advocate for breaking societal norms. She coined her own Life Meant, which is basically encompassing the path of self-growth that has brought adventure, success, and fulfillment to herself. And she now envisions that bringing that to other people through workshops, lectures, and programs globally. Sister, such a treat to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to get down and dig deep into the story and where this came from and the transitions that we can make in life.
We can start everywhere and anywhere with you, can't we? So let's get really. I think where I really want to start with you is at what point did you put on the rubber gloves for the first time and really start digging into your own stuff? Because if I know anything about you, it's you're a person that's really willing to just go there for yourself. Mm-hmm. And in and around there, the word that is most demonstrative of your energy for me is integrity.
Yes.
Right. So I really feel that coming from you whenever we talk, which is extremely valuable. So when was the first time you put on the rubber gloves to go do your own work in your recollection?
Such a great question. And it's part of my story. And when you dig into my website, I have a little bit of the story, but I don't think I've actually told the depth of that story to anyone. Actually,
here we go.
Oh, you heard
it here first.
So I think it was around 2012 is when I started digging in deep after a really traumatic breakup, and just kind of I was lost. I lost myself. I lost who I was. And at the end of all that, it was just the one really tragic week of, friends moving abroad, lost the support system, and finding yourself just truly alone going, well, this can't be how life is, and I asked that question of what do I want? What is going on here? How do I live a better life? And so I was watching this TED Talk. What one does when when you're lost, you watch TED Talks.
You're looking for guidance. Yeah. It's a great place to go.
And at the time, I didn't know much about self-growth, self-development. Those were books, those self-help books.
Yeah, self-help books is what she called it, not shelf.
I had those on the shelf. Didn't read a damn one of them. Probably should have in hindsight. So I was watching this TED Talk, and there's this guy, Ian Usher.
Yeah.
And he talked about selling his life for a new one. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sell my life for a new one because this one sucks.
like trading it in or something.
I'm like, can you do that? And I like a used car. This car is broke down. I don't want it anymore, but let's go get a new car, right? And I thought that's how you fix yourself, change the shit on the outside. And oh my God, then this is how, you get back. Okay. Good. Let's go change the outside of my life. I don't like my job wasn't, I wasn't fulfilled. I loved teaching, but I wasn't loving the testing and all the stuff. Yeah. And I was like, there's got to be something better. And so I kept watching, and he's like, set 200 goals in 200 weeks. I'm like, that's a fantastic idea. So I got out my notebook and I started writing down my 200 things I wanted to do in 200 weeks, which is 2.5 years. So I was like, okay, I can do this. What goals? Knew nothing at that time about, intuition and setting intentions, and none of that stuff was part of my life at that point. So I'm like, oh, cool. Want to see the Eiffel Tower? that very superficial, surface level stuff. I want to travel the world and I want to be a better person. And you really, I didn't dig deep at that time, but it was a start.
Exactly.
It was a
That's
start.
the key, right? You've got to start somewhere, you know?
Start somewhere.
Yeah.
Like if even if you don't know a lot, and that's my big message is to like everyone is like start somewhere. You don't have to know everything about, personal, diving deep into like the core of who you are. Starting somewhere, and that's what it was. It was starting somewhere.
Perfect.
And that's how it all started. And at the time I knew nothing. And so I started digging deep and said, okay, I want to live and travel abroad. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it all came from. Where it all started.
Sweet. Amazing. Because you're an educator with like, obviously it's cool to see the thread of what's going on in your life, just like being your friend, like seeing how education is now something you're affording adults and like, you're working with people in this personal development space from a really deep-seated place of wanting to support relationships is from what I see. But then also you've always been an educator and like you've always had kind of a very free reign in the way that you educate as well. So looking from the outside in, people may almost feel like you had somewhat of a dream job,
I get asked that all the time. Oh my God, you had the house, you had the life, you had the dream job, you lived in Florida, you had like all of it. You had everything that, the American dream. But what I found, I wasn't fulfilled. Like it was perfect. But, you mentioned that I had the free range to educate. Yeah. At that time, I did not.
Right.
And that's what I found, like teaching and living abroad is in the international school system. I was in the international school scene. I was actually lucky to find a job and a school that allowed me to dream big and to do things the right way with children and empower them, empower their learning, empower their, their EQ as well as their IQ, which I hadn't found before. It was so limited to like testing and this is how you have to educate and this is what you're going to teach them and very rigid. Yeah. But suddenly now I was like, oh wow, I can meditate with my kids in class. Yeah. We have recess. This is amazing. Yeah. And I have time to play. Like, so it really shifted who I was as an educator, which dove me deep into the personal growth coaching. That's when I started becoming a coach and said, okay, how can I use coaching language with children? This is an amazing gift because I'm their guide and facilitator. I am not their like dictator of this is what you're going to learn. And that shift was just huge.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Even because like when you get into the coaching space, like, there's so much space for you to just continually be curious about your own patterns, your own belief systems, what you're operating from, your own systems. And from there, like bringing that awareness into like the youth where, they're so young. Like I even know, the curiosity, like stoking their curiosity about quantum, it's like, hey, like on the quantum, time doesn't exist. Like
I did that.
I know.
We got into this whole discussion once about, I said, but what if time didn't exist? And they're like, what? What do you mean? I said, well, and we got into the quantum level and they were so curious. And I was like, okay, to the other kids, like, well, here's today's math lesson. Like, we're going to come over here. You're welcome to join us. We're going to dig deep into the scientific of quantum physics and understanding, the universe in a grander scale. Yeah. And like, I had like 10 kids come over here and the other 5 were like learning their mathematics and it was totally fine. And that was acceptable in my classroom and having that free range of what do I want to learn today? How do I want to guide my learning today? And some of the kids wanted to dive into math. The other ones were like, time doesn't exist. So, yeah.
So that freedom of range, obviously, you went from Florida then to Dubai in terms of
Bahrain.
My apologies. To then find more creative expression and freedom in like how you're showing up to educate. And now where you are in terms of like now coaching high profile execs and stuff like that, with their relationships, is that the next, like do you see your own journey expanding in that freedom? Yeah.
Such a great question because one of the reasons I wrote my book and a lot of these things start...
Which, just for those flagging Letters to a Jerk, JERK, which...
stands for Just Experiencing Repeated Karma.
Damn it, you took the punchline out of it! I love it. Yeah, dude. Just Experiencing Repeat Karma, which we can dive into. But tell us more about what you were saying.
And so I see it coming full circle, really. It's a great question because when I was in the last 2 years of, switching into a coaching role and guide as a teacher, I'm noticing 9-year-olds with, issues with self-esteem, not believing in themselves. They don't feel like they're enough. And this not enoughness is already present at 9 years old. So that made me go, okay, this is full circle. And when I wrote the book and I was like, okay, a lot of the relationship issues got into, okay, self-esteem and self-worth and I'm not enoughness. I said, well, gosh, I'm seeing this in both realms.
Yeah.
I see me coming full circle in the education of not just, the women and the adults, even maybe later on men, but this is starting with my young girls and even my young boys.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's why I'm an advocate for children at a very young age, because we're developing their EQ and we need to really pay close attention to of the word choice we're using. And that's why I developed that coaching language with the kids, because when we are using coaching language, we're allowing them to, we're holding space for them to grow emotionally, allowing them to know that, tears are okay. And they, don't always have to be tough if you're a boy. And knowing as a girl, like, just because you're coming into yourself and you're now aware of what other people think and feel about you, that it's okay for them to think and feel that, but it's about building yourself from the inside. Yeah. And when you can teach a 9-year-old about their subconscious mind and calling it their inner ninja, they're calling in their inner ninja or their inner cheerleader to battle their subconscious mind of the, one saying, you're not enough today. And then you wake up your inner ninja and they like kind of kick its ass. No, I am enough. And, you see that growth. So I see that coming full circle into even today where when I'm working with women and digging deep, and we find out a lot of this happens when they're young.
Of course.
A lot of this. So I see this full circle expansion of coming back to working with the children, which is in my next book. So. Yeah,
incredible. I'm so fascinated. There's already another book on its way out. Like, this one just dropped high. She's already like, cannot be stopped. So, tell us a little bit about that, because, I've got this, like you touched on it in that conversation there. I can't really draw back to exactly where, but, our relationships fundamentally, being able to see yourself, like this whole energy of your relationships being a mirror. I'm not sure if that was the perfect little segue into that.
It's the perfect because I talk about the mirror in my book.
Yeah, so tell me.
And we call it the jerk mirror, actually.
The jerk mirror. Yeah.
The jerk mirror. And that's your just experiencing repeated karma mirror, where you really look in the mirror and see, is this something that's continually like a pattern in my life? Yeah. Recognizing those patterns in my life. But if we really go into the deeper of the relationships, we are never taught about how to deal with relationships.
Yeah, there's no school.
There's no school. Like, why is there no school?
This is what I love, right? Like, you learn physics, you learn maths, you learn biology, you learn English. Right. You don't learn how to like spend a moment in stillness. You don't know how to learn to deal with anxiety, depression. You don't learn about relationships, which are like the things that get you through life.
And when I realized, I'm like, why is there no relationship? And that's it actually dawned on me when I was watching Big Bang Theory. I fucking love that show. Yeah. And he's talking about the relationship agreement with his, him and Amy Farrah Fowler. And he gets in. I was like, thinking to myself, why don't we have a relationship agreement with ourselves? And that's kind of like where it all stemmed from. I was like, yeah, we really need these. We need to learn about relationships. We need to learn about self-love. And that's something I dive deep into in my book, is like, how do we make that agreement with ourselves? Why are we not educated around it? And how can we educate ourselves around it? So one of the things here, even that I'm still digging deep into, is how do we educate ourselves around communicating in relationships and the attachment to our beliefs. Because our belief systems drive a lot of what, how we show up. I talk a lot about how relationships aren't 50-50. They're 100-100. And, we've been fed this myth of the 50-50 rule, and it's not true. You are 100% accountable for 100% of how you show up. I don't remember where I learned that. I know I don't accredit it to me. But I've said it so often now, I can't remember who it comes from. That I embody this. Because 100% of how we show up in a relationship is 100% how you're going to mirror me.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming in like broken and the victim and, and I'm needy and I come in with all my baggage into a relationship, that's what's going to mirror back to me. I'm not going to pull in the relationship that I want as far as love. And that's even in friendships too. Yeah. realizing that I've been through a series of narcissistic relationships in my life, I kept drawing that in.
Yeah.
So because of that state of mind that I, learned how I learned how love was.
Yeah.
That's how I repeated it throughout my life.
And when she's saying learned, it's not so much conscious learning, it's the subconscious learning, like
subconscious learning.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah.
Had no clue that this is how I was showing up in the world. And a lot of people don't know this is how they're showing up in the world. Through this, the subconscious is driving, what they say, 95% of us is run by the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And 5% of our brain is making conscious decisions.
Yeah.
Well, what if we could make 5% greater conscious decisions?
Wow.
Like even just 5% showing up like, oh God, okay.
I'll take 1%, actually. I'll take 1%, and that's plenty good. Considering how far the 5% has gotten me, that percent will be plenty good.
And that's really getting down to the core. We don't learn about relationships and really learning more about communication and how we show up and how we're present in any relationship. That's what I dove deep into.
I love that. And, there's this thing that you mentioned, which is really deep for me is, I've always shared this and I've kind of touched wood, always been sharing this. Like, I've always been that kid that, people were coming to for advice. I was always that guy. Like, I'm sure you were the same, You're already the coach in your friendship circles growing up. And then later on, it's like, oh, there's actually a career around coaching. It's amazing. Like, I can't believe I can get paid to listen and then, consult like that. But I remember people used to be like relationships and I was just always a maths kid. So I was always like, exactly what you shared about the 100% thing really resonated with me because it's like, let's just say, two halves are coming together to make a whole, right? And 200% are coming together to make 200%. But if any half isn't whole in itself, you're not going to make a full whole.
Right.
And that was always the language that I used, and I continue to lean on that today. But I've been carrying that around in my awareness for quite some time. And recently what I've also been coming to in, and I'll be completely vulnerable and completely transparent here. I went to a dinner where basically I took my now fiance's family out to dinner. And this was quite a while before I proposed. And they were like, her dad pretty much asked me, how do you know she's the one for you? And I was like, oh, this is a test, And I was like, oh, he's got me. And it's one of those moments where, your brain can go, oh shit. And it's like, okay, no, great spirit, you take control, just speak from the heart sort of thing. And the one thing that came out was growth. The fact that we're both anchored in growth, I know that I can grow more in the relationship, touch wood, than I can outside of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I know she feels the same way, in my humble opinion. I can't speak for her, obviously. That, for me, lets me know that, there's, whatever happens, we'll continue to grow. And what I found is, I use this as an example. So I'm talking to those listening on the audio. I'm holding 4 fingers up on one hand and 3 fingers on the other. Yeah. And generally what I find is we find someone to compensate our gaps and our voids, right, in most relationships. In my humble opinion, this may not be everyone's truth. This is just the model that I use. Yeah. And the 3 and the gaps between the 4 prongs is there's 3 gaps, and so they fit really nicely. And so you end up in this really snug harmony between 2 people. But then the minute one starts to grow and go, actually, I'm curious about this, generally you find if this person's not willing to grow, they pull the other person back in and go, hey. No, this is who we are. We've got almost like relationship identity politics.
This relationship identity politics.
Do you know what I mean?
It's completely true because it's seen, and I've seen it with people who are transitioning. So the women that I work with, they start changing their lives, and they're realizing that friendships are no longer fitting. They're realizing that the people that they want to date are no longer the people they want to date. Or if they're in a relationship or in a marriage, they're going, oh, well, now I'm starting to grow this part of myself, but my partner's not supporting me on that. Yeah. And I'm not saying they have to do it with you. It's about the support. Like, okay, cool, you're doing this. I completely 100% support you. It's not my thing, but I support you in it. Yeah. Or maybe they do. Maybe they become interested in it.
Yeah,
totally fine. Like, I'm interested. It's up to them. But if there's any of that tug, any of that tug back, it keeps you from growing.
And I think that becomes like, therein comes like the toxic space, right? Which is like, I can't really like express myself, and eventually like that self fissures from the other self. Whereas anchored in that growth, like no matter what comes up for me, I'm growing. Whatever comes up for you, you're growing. I respect that you got to go where you got to go. Right. I feel like that was like, and that was my response. And so I've kind of been crystallizing that as an awareness in terms of what comes up for me. But I really want to speak to you in regards to that, because that for me, in terms of growth, takes a lot of trust. And is facilitated a lot by communication. So when people, like, I don't do a lot of relationship work for people, just because it's not, I'm more passionate about purpose.
Right.
But fundamentally, like, if we do have conversations, it's like, where's your trust level at?
Yeah.
How's your communication going? Tell us more about trust and communication.
This is such a good segue into this, because, I definitely call myself the life after relationships coach, or the life beyond relationships, because it's really, and it dives into what life meant is, and finding the meaning behind your life.
Yeah.
But when we dive into trust and communication, one of the things that we have to be very careful of is the lies we tell ourselves. There's a whole chapter in my book about like the lies we tell ourselves, and this trust starts with you.
Yeah.
Trust of yourself is the very first key. If you can't trust like yourself, how are you going to show up in a relationship and be trusting of other people? Because when you are standing in your own power, when you're standing in your own place where you own your own truth, then you can stand and trust with someone else.
Yeah.
But until, and I learned this the hard way, when I didn't trust myself, I couldn't stand in a relationship and trust someone else, because a lot of what was coming up in why I wasn't trusting, and why I find, clients aren't trusting, is because of limiting beliefs that they've created within their own mind, or lies that they've been telling themselves that, I'll be single forever. Yeah. Like, I don't trust men. And because of one thing that happened.
I'm independent. Yeah.
Yes. I love that one. That's my favorite. I do a lot of high performance women. I don't, I take care of myself, and trust me, that's like one of the things that was mentioned to me is like, you don't let anyone take care of you. You don't trust anyone to take care of you. And that made me question that about myself. I was like, okay, let's dive into that. Why is it? Well, I found out that there were some beliefs that if I wasn't taking care of myself, then I couldn't then I would lose myself. So I had to heal that about myself and say, okay, can you help me? And I'm still learning to ask for help and support. That's still a deep one for me, because it was ingrained in my mind that, always take care of yourself and you don't need anybody. That was a belief that was taught to me. And I was like, okay, well, that's...
Which is a common belief in a masculine-oriented society. You can see how, fending for oneself is a very masculine concept.
And especially for women. Yeah. Like, you need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself. And so I was like, well, how do I balance that in my life? And again, that started with trust of myself. When I could stand in my own truth and understand how trust of oneself plays into trust of any relationship, then you start to have better communication, because you believe in yourself. So you're not afraid to have that tough conversation when something comes up in a relationship. You believe now, like, no matter what, I'll be okay. So let me have this difficult conversation. When this happened, this is how I was thinking. This is what I thought you meant. And this is how I took it. Yeah. You're able to have a better conversation as well, because you believe in you.
What you just shared is like the yummy, you talked about trust and also opened that up into communication, which I love. Which is one of the biggest things I've recently been exploring about relationships, is using the phrase, and obviously you just alluded to this in your own way, the story I've been telling myself. It's like you communicate something, like let's just say, you and I are out having a coffee, right? And I'm in the middle of having coffee and I'm having a really deep conversation with you, and going past this way, right? And I don't see is like, let's just say a unicorn on a unicycle.
Because this happens.
Yeah, right. Every day. We're in Croatia. Magical stuff happens. And legitimately, your attention wavers.
Yeah.
Right? And in that, I'm like, oh, she's not interested in what I'm saying. Right? Mm-hmm. But really what's happened is you like something freak has just happened over here and you just go, what the fuck? Oh, wait, I'm in a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and you come back to the conversation. Now, in and around that, like there's the opportunity for me to feel hurt, or there's the opportunity for me to communicate that and go, what happened there, Amy? Like the story I'm telling myself, prefacing it with that, going, the story I'm telling myself is what I was sharing wasn't interesting to you, but it was actually something that was really deep and meaningful to me. And you're like, dude, a unicorn just rode past on the unicycle. Did you fucking see that shit?
Sorry, I'm really into your conversation. But
and then I'd be like, oh, no shit. Okay, it wasn't about me, because we spend so much time living in our own bubbles, right? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So
that is really like, and that's basically what I do is I help you rewrite your story. Mm-hmm. I mean, bottom line is we have been like telling these lies to ourselves. How do we rewrite these? How do we dig deep into what is the story?
Yeah.
First we have to find our patterns, to find the story that we've been telling ourselves for so long.
Takes vulnerability. So
long. And one of the things I dig deep into is, what is that story? Let's look at the story over time.
Yeah.
And now let's find the patterns.
Yeah.
And now that we know the patterns, now we can find the story, the lies that we've been telling ourselves.
Sure.
Which feeds the beliefs that we have about ourselves.
Yeah.
Now that we know the beliefs, let's start healing those, because if we don't deal with the emotion, then we can't truly change.
Yeah.
So I forgot your question because this is so good.
I just want to riff. Keep riffing.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about, that story within ourselves, there's so many like I'm still digging stories out, and we're 5 years into this.
Yeah.
5 years. I just recently found a story this week, and when we showed up at Mind Valley University, and I realized that there was some old story that needed to come out. And I think I feel so safe around the people in this bubble.
Yeah, of course.
That the story is like, okay, now it's time, because these are the people that are going to help you. And I get really big into your support team. Yeah. Who is your support team? Right. And, when you're learning to retell your own story, you can't do it alone. And I had met this person, a little while back, and they were stuck in the fact that, no, I've got to fix this all by myself. And it wasn't anybody I was coaching, but I'm listening to them tell the story to themselves that, I was in this relationship where I was married to a narcissist, and now I just need to know that I can do it all by myself, and I've got to heal by myself. And I kept hearing the words by myself, and I kept thinking, we will do better with a support team. You would do better with like yes, you can heal yourself. Absolutely. Because that's ultimately what we're doing. But having a support team of people who have been through it. Yep. Find the people that have been on the journey and have succeeded, not the ones that are like still living in the victim, still living in the pain of, you can't trust, you have to be careful who you choose to put on that support team. Yep. Because otherwise you're going to end up feeding that story, because we have two choices. We can keep feeding our story and finding the things that support it, or we get uncomfortable. And that's what it's about, getting uncomfortable with our story and going, okay, I need to write a new story, because our body ultimately just wants to go back to what's comfortable. Even if it's pain. Even if it's pain, we will go back to the pain before we choose the path that is like, okay, this is hard and this is uncomfortable, and I don't like it, and changing. It's like, because you're basically shedding your shell. And you're shedding the shell of your past that has held you back. And to stand in your truth, you have to get uncomfortable. Yeah. And that is that story. That's writing a new story versus retelling the just experiencing repeated karma of the old story. Now you want to live in what I call, I have a distinction. Jerk versus nerd. Do you want to be a jerk in your life, or do you want to be a nerd? A nerd is smart, and they live with intention, and they follow the dharmic path. And a lot of people don't know what karma and dharma really is. Yeah. I wrote a chapter about it. Yeah. So, but karma are those life lessons, and that's with action, But if you're not taking action, those will repeat. Yeah. So the action becomes that dharmic path, the intentions that you're setting. Remember, I said in the beginning, we start with those goals. Start somewhere. Well, when I learned that intention setting versus goal setting, because the goal setting can be a pass or fail, and that can really, really hurt your like take a good hit. Like, oh my God, I wasn't, and that really kills the self-esteem even further. But when you set an intention like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose weight, you're just always working toward that intention. Yeah, you're never pass or failing. Like, oh, I lost a pound, great. You know, my intention is to have a better relationship. So every day I'm gonna grow myself in the relationship and help my partner grow. No pass or fail. Yeah. Just always being on that path of intention. And that's the nerd life, as I call it, versus, being the jerk life. Yeah. As where we keep experiencing karma until we learn the lesson. Yeah. And, I say in the book, I think that I had the 12 jerks it was 12 jerks, if you didn't tell you. I think it was my karmic lesson so that I could go and teach other people about it. Like, here you go. Let me just keep teaching you these lessons because you're not listening. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think that really speaks to what I've come to find over the Inspired Evolution as well, as our greatest challenges form our greatest gifts. And exactly what you've just been sharing. You need to get in touch with your story, though, to realize what your challenge consistently has been in order to tap in to your gifts. I think you also spoke really deeply, and I think the support team is a really key thing that maybe we just take a minute to shine a flashlight on that even deeper. Yeah. In that, oftentimes I'm so guilty of this myself. It's like, yep, you're supporting others on your journey. You should be able to support your own journey. And now, every year I will spend 6 months with a coach. Like this last 6 months I spent with Eckhart Tolle. Every 6 months of year, I have made a commitment to myself to spend it with a coach and then integrate. Yep. Coach and then integrate. And the reason I do that is because I realize it's so difficult to see the story when you're the protagonist in it. You're not the narrator. You're the hero.
Your subconscious is the narrator. Yeah. And is that it's not always the best narrator because it's pulling from your fears and sometimes it's pulling good stuff, sometimes it's not pulling good stuff. So who do you want to be the narrator of your story? You ultimately want your conscious mind to be the narrator of your story, with intention that you set. But when we allow our fears to be the narrator of our story, if we're not clear on what our story is, that's what could happen. That's always my biggest thing is okay, is this true? Is this real? Do I have evidence? Of course we can find evidence for anything, but actual real life evidence that they said, there was no unicorn walking by. I was just not interested in your conversation, right? That's real evidence. They said it to you. But you would have had to ask you in that moment, okay, so, she's not interested in my conversation. Is that true? Or did a unicorn just walk by? Yeah. So really having that evidence and grounded in the truth of, okay, let me step back a second and say, is what's going on right now me? And what my subconscious fears and beliefs are? Or is it really happening? Is this really honest to God truth? And again, when you're not clear with that story and the beliefs that you have, and they keep coming up. You'll find more and more. The more you dig into yourself, the more you're going to find, especially the older you are. I'm I work with some 20 somethings and it's not as much. They don't have the belief systems as
Powered
deep unless there was a lot of trauma from the in the teens and the the growth years, which I call the middle school years can be so traumatic. So
I think it's really interesting. There's something that doesn't segue in this conversation, but I just want to share because I remember I went and lived on a mountain in South America, in Brazil, for a month right after I graduated, and I was just living in a remote community, and there was a guy there, and he was the leader of the community, but very humble guy. And we were talking about traumas, and I said, a lot of the healing work you do here, you advocate doing it during the day, whereas other people that share the same modality prefer to do it during the night. Can you tell me why you prefer to open up your process during the day? And he goes, because during the day, you can actually see the other people in the space. And when you leave and you come back, you hold the door open, you're in a process, but you're also learning how to interact with people. He goes, at no point did a blade of grass come up to you and traumatize you. At no point did that cow say, fuck you. At no point did nature hurt you. Yeah?
Right.
unless obviously there's external environmental like cataclysms, but segue. I digress. But you know what I mean? Like, at no point did nature impact you. And he goes, but most of our traumas are trapped in us from each other. And we actually have the opportunity through like deep like hypnosis processes and stuff like that because we're in that deep state, to rewrite the script, you know? And I think it's really poetic. I just illuminated even further what you just shared, like anchored that moment in time for me even deeper, just going, that's right, you know? Like we take on stuff from each other much more than any other source of anything else, you know? And there's like a real opportunity to reveal and heal things, which is what you were mentioning before. Yeah. So in and around there, tell me a little bit more about, I do want to talk about how to make agreements with yourself. Okay. Yeah, so I really want to talk about that. But just before we go into there, let's perhaps like preface that with like, you're in a victim, you know?
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit more about the victim state, and just so people that are listening in that perhaps don't identify with that can get a bit more context around it?
Yeah, there's many states of you know, your emotional realm, but ultimately when we have that repeated story. And when I say victim, I don't mean like, you know, victim of abuse, or like, I mean, which could have been true. Yeah. But, you know, the victim mindset of this is just how life is, you know, that life happens to me, and this keeps happening to me, and then this happened to me. And then I always say, okay, it happens through you and for you. And those are two very different things.
Very subtle, very different.
Very subtle. And I do this a lot on my Facebook Lives. I have 200 women that are in my Facebook Live group, where each week, 3 times a week, I'm coaching. Yeah. Absolutely. No, like this is, and I call it the shit my mama didn't tell me. Yeah. And what's funny is the shit my mama didn't tell me. I swear it should be, maybe it should be a podcast.
I think it should be. I love the name of it.
Shit my mama didn't tell me. And funny, my mom watches every day. I was like, yeah, I didn't tell you that. No, I didn't tell you that. She's like, no, I should have.
She's like, damn it, I should have told you that.
But it's the honest to God truth, you know, and that's why I love the cover of this book. Is like, it's like the advice that mom should have gave us. But sometimes our own mothers were suffering in the
They didn't get the advice
They didn't get the
themselves.
advice, and it's repeated through generations and generations. Somebody was telling me a story about, you know, it was like the pork roast and why they cut off the ends.
Yes.
Was that you that was telling me the story?
I've heard this story. So basically it's like, just to introduce it to everyone, it's like you go to your mum's house and she makes a pork roast and she cuts the edges off the pork roast. Right. And it's like, Mum, why do you cut the edges of the pork roast? And she's like, that's how my mum did it. Right. And then goes, okay, let's go ask.
So we asked Grandma.
Like, Grandma, what's going on? Like, why do you cut the edges of the pork roast? And she's like, that's how my mum did it. And then, like, this is obviously quite a fortuitous family, because then he goes to great grandma. She's still alive. And she goes, great grandma, why'd you cut the edges of the pork roast? Like, tell me why. Like, there's such good pieces to it and it's missing. And she goes, our ovens were really small, and so I could only fit that much of the pork roast in there. And so, like, what has become utilitarian for that person has now passed down as a culture and a story, when really you've got these amazing bits to the pork roast that you can include in, but you've just choosing to write a story.
And that's exactly why I do that. Like the shit my mom didn't tell me, because it's super important. And I digress from the question because it was so good.
It was like the inner victim.
Okay, so the inner victim. So now we have these stories that we've been telling ourselves for so long. So maybe this is a story we actually learned. We actually learned it was the same repeated story that was maybe from our mother or our father. And now it becoming ingrained in our story. And now we're repeating that. And then we pass that on to our own children. And so when we're super clear in our story, then we don't become the victim of our own life. So, and life starts happening for us and we're learning from it. But when I say it happens through us, it's happening through that story. Through the story we're telling ourselves, through our subconscious mind. But when we can flip that in from the through to the for, okay, oh wow, this is happening. So let me go, oh, okay. Is that my story? Or, okay, no, that's not my story. This is like, okay, so I got this. This is happening for me. I need to learn a lesson here, you know? I think about, you know, yesterday we went on that trip, and what was the story? Like, I crashed the bike. I just own it. I crashed the bike, dropped it on my toe, broke a toe. You know what the story was? Is I didn't ask for help. I wasn't, I knew how to ride the bike, but I was like, I had to jump down this curb and turn the bike at the same time. And if I would have just stopped and said, hey, I can't get this bike off this curb, but it was that story of like, I don't need help. I can do this by myself. Yep. So what happened? Life happened through that story and then taught me something to me. Yeah. But if I would have said, hey, I need help, can you do that? Then it would have happened for me and it would have probably been a different experience. Got it. Even just those simple decision making, I'm okay. Don't worry. But it was a very big lesson that I realized. And that happens in everyone's lives. Yeah. Are these things that are happening for me to learn and grow? Because sometimes we grow from pain. You talk a lot about the Centauri and the Kensho moments, which, I remember being in that class with you. And I think I sent you a snapshot of my notes. I'm like, this is so true. Maybe, am I going to learn from pain? Yeah. Or am I going to learn
from bliss and
pleasure? So, and then that day I learned from pain.
So tell us from there, there's so much space from that place where we're trapped in our stories to then, work on our self-worth, work on helping channel life being through us and for us. Mm-hmm. How do we make agreements with ourselves?
And that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. What I have found is in working, with myself and then writing the book and then working with clients. And what I know to be true is when we start our relationships with an agreement with ourselves before we enter into any relationships, you can even do it now. It's never too late to make an relationship agreement with yourself. Yeah. And it starts with your non-negotiables. What are my non-negotiables? What are the things that are not? No, this is where I draw the hard line in the sand. And so many of us, and this was even true for me, is I would go into a relationship and be like, okay, great. Oh my God, I met someone. This is so lovely. This is amazing. Oh, it's so magical. And you're in that honeymoon phase, right? Totally. And then 3 months in, you're like, oh, crap, they drink too much, or crap, they're a yeller.
Time they don't
or they don't give me support. But when you enter in, you now can have these valuable conversations when you're first starting into a relationship, because you are clear on your non-negotiables and you have that line drawn in the sand. And I'm always adding to that list. I would say it's an organic document that you create for yourself. And then that's the first. There's 4 parts to it. Sure. So the second part is self-love. How, and I swear to God, I'm starting a revolution of self-love. It's so true and so present. We did the Awaken Women the other day, and what was the most common thing I heard is I don't have self-love. And as women, we need to really stand in that truth. And I don't even think it's just women, even men. Yeah, totally. Everybody needs to put more self-love, and we're so hard on ourselves. I know I was so hard on myself in the past. And I can still be hard on myself. Yeah. And then I go, oh, wait, hang on. Yeah. Let me be loving and kind to myself.
Just a little bit of self-kindness.
So once we establish our non-negotiables, then we jump into, the really big second part of a relationship agreement with yourself is how do you implement self-love? What are your agreements with yourself? So when you're down, what do you do? How are you growing your self-love? What are the things that are continual practices on your daily basis? Forgiveness, gratitude. What are those things, and are you holding yourself accountable for them? Sure. That's why I say an agreement. Yeah. Because now you're like, oh, I have an agreement with myself that I will always talk about my non-negotiables in my relationships, and I will always practice self-love. Yeah. And I will share that practice. And then the third thing is self-development. Self-growth, self-development. Yeah. How are you each and every month daily growing yourself? So, for example, we always talk about the best morning practices, from the moment my eyes open, I'm doing, okay, I'm so grateful for a good night's sleep. From the moment my eyes open, I start with gratitude and thinking of myself, because what I was doing was grabbing the phone, or like Joe Dispenza talks about this all the time. We're okay, I've missed all these texts. I need to do this. Oh my gosh. No, starting right from the moment my feet hit the floor, in gratitude of the day, in gratitude of what happened, what I want to happen for the day, whatever it is. And And then having some sort of really beautiful morning ritual is we all know this to be what high achievers do and people who are living their lives on the right path. So with that, 20 minutes of your day should always be growing yourself or, in some way, something that you're reading, something that you're doing, and even if it's not like just self-growth 20 minutes a day, some part of your week should be working on yourself in self-love.
Wow. I feel like we've been talking about 3 of the 4 steps and they're all focused on yourself.
Yes.
And we're talking about relationships. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us about step 4.
And that's the thing is when you can show up fully present, then you will ultimately attract what you want in your relationships.
I love you.
I mean, that's the secret. Everyone's like, what's the secret to a great relationship? And so the last and final thing is something we already talked about, a support team.
Yeah, right.
The fourth and final thing to a relationship agreement is agree, and you talked about this clearly. I have a coach. Coaches have coaches. Yeah. And you said 6 months of a coach. Yes, always have someone that you can work with and then integrate and work with and integrate. Therapy's gotten such a bad rap in the past, and people don't understand that there's a very huge difference between therapists and coaches.
Very.
And coaches are the ones that are going to listen. They like you said, they're on the outside of your story going, here's your story. Is this the one you want to keep telling?
Yeah.
Let's write a new one. Let me empower you. Let me be your cheerleader when you can't be. And you're having a conversation with a coach. And I love my coach. My coach, she's absolutely amazing. Love you, Fran. And I've been integrating for 6 months. I'm on my 6th part of the month, but she taught me about my bobbleheads, which are all my stories. And so I love it. I put my bobblehead.
That metaphor.
I've called them my bobbleheads,
Little story.
and their heads are bobbling back and forth, going, "Oh yeah, you're not enough today, nobody loves you, and because it's this wow.
Yeah.
And so I put my bobbleheads at dinner, like, oh here's my fear bobblehead, here's my not enough bobblehead, and here's the I can't do this bobblehead. You guys go have lunch, and the I'm awesome bobblehead and I are going this way. But by giving them voice, but I learned this from my coach, and this is when I get into those really challenging moments. I turn to my support team. My mom is a great support team.
Yeah.
And, but there has been friends and people in my life that I was like, oh, you can't be on the support team because you facilitate that negative belief system. And, you're like,
very good distinction point.
You have to make sure that whoever's in your support team is someone that's been through it and is also kind of the cheerleader that gives, because everyone can give advice.
But they're also holding a frequency that you respect in the space.
Yeah. And frequency, that's something I just learned about a year ago. I had no idea, maybe I already, in a subconscious level knew.
Yeah.
Because you gravitate toward those people.
Yeah.
Right? But then now that I'm like, ooh, okay, that's not the frequency I want to be on. What's happening here? And I started questioning that. And I was like, oh, turns out that they're not in alignment with what my belief system is now. Yeah. And that's ultimately... See, the book even agrees. You're karmically right. There you go.
All the synchronicities. Hey, I want to dive deep into one of those 4 steps, just because I've got this curiosity point, and I am conscious of the time, but I really want to go here, which is non-negotiables. Yeah. Right. So step 1, setting your non-negotiables. I can see how healthy that really is. Mm-hmm. But I also know that expectations set you up for disappointment.
Oh, the expectation hangover.
Right?
I love that book by Christine Hessler. That's one of my favorite books.
So, there's a subtle difference. Can you talk to us in terms of if I'm setting non-negotiables, am I setting expectations, or what am I actually doing?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very valid question, because your expectations are things that you like kind of want to attract in your life, but a non-negotiable is very clear, and those come from your belief systems. Once you've identified your patterns and you've found in your life, and that's why going through the whole process is important. You can't just go, okay, here's my non-negotiables when you're not clear what your patterns or your story is. And I find that some people like to just set non-negotiables without being really clear, like, okay, I don't want a man without a job. Okay, clearly that can be a non-negotiable, but is that like an emotionally deep level of non-negotiables?
Or is that an expectation?
Is that an expectation?
Right.
You see that little fine line?
I do, actually. So expectation is more about the outside, whereas non-negotiable is about your non-negotiables from the inside.
Yes. How are you emotionally growing, and who's going to support you in your EQ? Yeah. Because, you can say, I want someone that's always constantly striving for their best self. Yeah. And that is very different from the guy who works on like for striving for their best self through self-growth and development. That's very clear. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas, I just want them to be, make sure they're always growing and they have a good job. Surface versus depth. Yeah.
Well, even just taking that even deeper going, I want someone that is willing to support my self-growth. That's like a non-negotiable thing because it's like about me generating my energy. Yeah, I like that.
And making those non-negotiables about yourself because you can't, again, let's come back to that. You cannot control someone else. Yeah. It's how 100% of how you're going to show up in a relationship. So if you know this is your 100%, and then they show up and you're like, ooh, that keeps you on the right frequency. Yeah. It keeps you on the same, okay, this is the level at which I want to vibrate with my partner. This is who I want to be with my partner. And the thing is we also become accepting of theirs. But what if they've not set non-negotiables? Yeah. Now, great. This is something you can have a conversation with. Maybe, you want that, and they don't know about it, but why can't you have that conversation with them? Yeah. Here's mine. Would you, are you interested in setting some of your own? Communicating. And depending on how they answer that question is going to be a really big eye opener for you in a relationship. Because I don't need that, that will if they shut down the conversation, that might not be the person that you want to, so again, being super clear is really how we get to that best relationship.
Amazing. I want to ask you touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of dharma, right? So what does dharma mean to you?
There's so many. And I have a chapter in my book called What's Your Dharma? Yeah. And so many people, don't understand like the karmic dharmic belief, they're like, oh, it's a religion. I'm like, well, actually it's a philosophy. Yeah. It's a life philosophy. And I can get down with any life philosophy that, supports our best self. So it's like, okay, how am I going to explain this to, just the average person? Yeah. So that's where I came up with the whole nerd thing, it's about being smart. Yeah. Like I can give you the whole philosophical answer of dharma, but that's not what people really want to know. They're like, how do I live a more dharmic life? Well, you set intentions. Right. It's the intended, your intentions on a path of self-growth and self-development. And that's like living like, the smart, you're setting yourself up for success. Will you have failures? Yes. Yeah. Yes, you will totally fail. But here's the difference is you'll know, I got to learn something here. Boom, back up. Okay. Yeah. Oh, failed again. Now I can come back up. Yeah. So when you have the intentions, you're not like feeling like killing your self-worth every time you have a lesson taught to you, a karmic lesson being taught. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Am I supposed to be learning something here? Yeah. Yeah. And so that's when you have intentions that keeps you on this nice path in life, because like, I don't believe in like happiness. That's why I say life meant. Yeah. And it's the perfect sense. What am I meant to be doing? What is the life I'm meant to be living?
I love that because I often talk about this in that like happiness is, and I got this from Ido Portal, who's a movement coach. He goes, happiness is a strong orientation, but nowhere near as strong as fulfillment.
100%.
And fulfillment dharma. Yeah. So life meant. Tell us more about life meant.
So,
because that was going to be my next question. What is your dharma for you? And so, like,
it's my life meant, and I want to help other people write that life meant. So I coined this term.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually
trademarked. So
Yeah,
don't be. Hey, I know it's cool.
You can
Back
hashtag it
Back
if you
off.
want. It's in registration, but that's fine. But it was so in coming full circle in our conversation back to that TED Talk I was watching back in 2012. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and find my life meant. Yeah. And it was like this moment where it's like, well, that's really good. I should hashtag that shit. And from that day forward, from 2012 forward, it was always about finding my life meant. I started a blog. I started writing about what it was like to go live and travel abroad and all the things that came with, you know, transitioning in life, because life is, you know, it was this huge transition of out of one thing into another. And how do you handle those transitions? Like, you know, going and living in a foreign country, let alone the Middle East. Yeah. And, you know, I'm American going to live in the Middle East, raised by CNN. And you know, that was like...
And blonde and female. Yeah.
And you know what I learned? Yeah. They're the most beautiful, amazing, and kind people who welcomed me into the family and the fold. And I lived by a belief system. Yeah. And when you living your life meant, you're finding out what is the path that's meant for you, and what do I believe? What is my story? How do I want to write it? And that is what life meant is for me, and that's what I want to help other people with.
Oh, incredible! You know, when I hear the word life meant, there's this real deep connotations around legacy. Yeah. That sort of sits really deep for me. So, yeah, you know, so I do want to take, you know, this time to just quickly ask you, like, what is your vision for the future in terms of like people and their relationships and, you know, people living in life meant? What does it look like?
And like I think I touched on this earlier, the self-love revolution.
Awesome.
Because my vision for and it's beyond. The book is just like one of the paths. It's really building a self-love revolution, starting with that relationship agreement, starting with everything that we can to build ourselves as humans. So in any relationship, whether that's a friendship, a work relationship, whatever it is, we stand in our truth and go, okay, this is what I know to be true about me, and this is how I can build this relationship. Whether it's a tough relationship, you know, sometimes we get into those, we're stuck with the boss that's a certain way. Yeah. But it's still going to be 100% how you show up. Yep. Because you don't have to let them change you. So when we have that standing in truth and standing in our self-love, we can ultimately build our best life.
I love that. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being here today, but not only just being here today, like also the little moments that inform, you know, going along on your journey, dealing with 12 jerks. And then,
sorry, everybody.
And then coming together and like actually infusing all that wisdom, you know, taking the courage and time to work on yourself. And like, if, like I said when I started this episode, it's like your integrity speaks volumes. Anybody that comes into like your presence is like completely just like, yep, she's humble, she's onto it, she's doing the work, and then she's sharing the wisdom of the work. And it's just so refreshing to have that space. And then, so just real deep gratitude for the work you've been doing on yourself, and then also the presence that brings in this conversation. As always, sister, wishing you all the best for the future, as you know. My last question, and by no means my least question, which I will ask actually just after I ask you, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Oh, awesome question. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, I almost did as well because I'm just in the riff of the flow of the conversation.
Definitely. So my website is super easy. There's all kinds. You can find the book on the website. Yep. So lifemeant.com. That's LIFEMEANT.com.
Awesome.
And also, if you're listening to the podcast and you send me an email at support@lifemeant.com, and I will offer a free Kindle version of my book to your way.
Yay!
So, free Kindle version, and reach out to me. So support at Life Meant. The website is actually being built right now, so I would love to give you the website address.
Yo.
But right now, I will send you everyone the link. That's go to support at lifement.com. But yes, lifement.com. That's to work with me. You can find the link to my Facebook tribe. You can find the Instagram. Everything that you need is right on that website.
Sweet,
So,
perfect.
yeah.
Sounds like the website's probably the best place to go,
Yeah.
and then from there, support at Life Meant, easy way to connect
Yes.
with you. Incredible. Last question, by no means least question. Beyond the smiles, beyond the laughter, beyond the jerks, beyond the relationships, beyond the teaching, beyond the coach, it's esoteric, but who is Amy?
That's such a deep question. So I'm this unique creature that has transformed into who she is. Beyond, like, you asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have said I was like everybody else. But now I'm a person who knows who they are and who shows up in the world in their truth, but is the supportive friend, the kind, in kindness and truth. That's a really a deep question. I really want to go home and think about that.
Homework from the podcast.
Who are you as a person? Yeah.
Thank you so much for showing up. Your humility, oh man, I love you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Love of the Inspired Evolution and sharing the Love of the Inspired Evolution. If you feel like this content has supported you or may support anyone else that you know may resonate with the content of it, please share away and share the love around. Thank you guys so much. And to stay up to date on whatever's coming out with the Inspired Evolution, please subscribe. There's all these links in the bio for you to tune into the episodes and all these different platforms, just so the message can get to you and your loved ones. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Stay inspired to evolve.